on now to talk about ecosystem services. These are defined as the benefits that humans freely gain from the natural environment from properly functioning ecosystems. These services are varied and very widespread, and we often define them into different broad categories of services. The first of those is provisioning, and these are sort of the direct benefits that ecosystems provide to society. Examples of this include food from the ecosystem, whether it's natural fisheries or forest products, for instance. Water, raw materials, for instance, for buildings, for roofing, for clothing, and fuel. The second category of services that ecosystems provide are termed regulating, and these provide indirect benefits. Basically, it's a free cleanup service and provides protection. So examples of this include pollution removal from the air and from water. For instance, wetlands are excellent at filtering out pollution from water flowing through them. The second one is climate regulation. This is where ecosystems, through their photosynthesis, can draw down carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and as carbon dioxide increases, the rates of drawdown increase, and so the extent of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is less than it would have been without that climate regulation contribution from ecosystems. They also play big roles in pest and disease control, really important in terms of waste breakdown and detoxification. So if you think, for instance, of a dung beetle, for instance, plays a really important role in breaking down, in this case, animal waste, animal feces, and recycling them into the soil system. Another type of service is around flood attenuation. We talked about this a little bit in the week when we looked at climate change and water, but healthy and functioning floodplains and river systems can play a big role in reducing the strength of floods through that attenuation process. And then the final category, or the third category at least, of ecosystem services are called cultural services. And these are the way that we appreciate and value the ecosystems within which we live. So there are obviously cultural practices, medical practices, spiritual appreciation. For those of us who aren't spiritual, then just pure aesthetic appreciation. We all like being in a beautiful natural landscape and enjoying how that sort of affects our feelings. And then finally, really importantly also, is the recreational service that ecosystems provide. So whether you're on the coast or inland, you could be doing water sports, you could be hiking in the mountains. Those are all recreational services that good functioning ecosystems provide. A really important type of recreational service in Africa is ecotourism. So Africa's blessed with some of the biggest populations of remaining big animals, for instance, and this is a really important recreational activity for many from across the world. And so here we see a cultural service actually having great economic value as well. The final category of ecosystem services are called supporting, and these are the fundamental processes that happen within an ecosystem that enable it to provide those other services I've talked about. So examples of this include what ecologists would call primary production, just the fact that the ecosystems the plants in the ecosystems are growing and providing plant material to support the whole food chain within that ecosystem, nutrient cycling and retention, and things like soil formation, so maintaining healthy soils and replenishing the soils through nutrient cycling, through breakdown of rock into soil by organisms within that ecosystem. So these services, as we've seen, provide benefits at many scales. We've talked a little bit about some of the global scale services in terms of climate regulation, But a really nice example of local ecosystem services comes from a study that was undertaken in Burkina Faso, which is in West Africa, in the semi-arid part of West Africa. So some researchers from the Stockholm Resilience Centre worked with local villages in Burkina Faso to map out the ecosystem services in what they called village landscapes. In other words, the landscapes surrounding the villages in which these people lived. And they identified a whole range of what they called social ecological patches. So this is a coherent sort of mini ecosystem where each social ecological patch provided a particular basket of ecosystem services and benefits. So for instance, within these landscapes, there were patches that were forest patches, patches that were cropping areas, depressions that were wetlands, and each of these different sort of mini ecosystems then provided a set of services. So for instance, the forest patches provided wood and fuel and fruits, and the crop patches provided the basic cereal crops for food for these communities. One of the important sort of things that emerged from the study was that these different patches or social ecological patches provide for both diversity in the services and benefits that the villagers get from the ecosystems, and then also, because of that, more resilience to climate variability and climate change. So in dry periods, the local depressions where the wetlands are provide water and food for animals. And also in dry periods when perhaps the crop production isn't as good as it would be in a normal year, they're able to use some of the products from the forested areas to support their diets and actually also generate income that supplements what they would have been getting from their cropping systems. These types of local ecosystem service or ecosystem patches are common across much of rural Africa. You could see similar patterns in just about any community across sub-Saharan Africa. And as with the Burkina Faso example, households in these rural areas are really closely coupled and dependent on these local ecosystem services. So any negative impacts on the function of these ecosystems then impacts on the services and benefits that they provide, and has knock-on effects for livelihoods and well-being of rural people in Africa. And climate is one of those mechanisms affecting ecosystem services. So we really want to try and explore how climate change might affect ecosystem services, both at these local scales and at bigger and bigger scales as one moves into ecoregions, into biomes, and into the global system as well.